One word to describe your first 100 days as mayor.
One word to describe my time as mayor, busy.
You've worn a lot of hats over the years, journalist, running a nonprofit, now as the leader of the city of Jacksonville. How would you describe what the first 100 days have been like?
Well, I think in a lot of ways it's been what I expected. You know, you've got a lot on the plate. Most of it was budget, right? You come in 2 weeks, you have to have a budget. So that was extremely busy. Then getting all the transition teams together and getting all the legislation together and the budget and all that, that has been a lot. And then of course you add on to that some of the crises that we had on top of it. You had the hurricane, you had the triple shooting, which was obviously horrendous. So I think in many ways it has been like crisis management. And in a way that's what I'm used to, right? In the news business, you're always going in with a plan of what your day's going to be like, what you want to accomplish by the end of your day or your week, and then something happens and you pivot and you deal with it and you go on. And that's really what it's been like for these first 100 days. But I've been pretty pleased. I mean, we've had a lot of community meetings. We've had a goal of keeping connected to the community, and we're now on our last of 14 community meetings that we've done. Thousands of people coming out to tell us what they would like to see the city do. So all in all, I think it's been a really good 100 days.
You touched on that mass shooting at the Dollar General. That was tough for everyone who lives here in Jacksonville and on the First Coast. How do you lead the city forward from something as horrible as that when that was so hate motivated?
Well, I think in a way, obviously, we want to continue to heal that community. That's important. And I think you do that by intentionally showing that you want to solve some of those issues. So one of the things that we're doing right now is we're putting together basically an anti-racism program. We're coming up with a program that we're going to unveil to the city as a way to connect people to make sure that we're ridding our city of these remnants of racism. And I think that's really important. So I think you have to show that community that not only are you present during the crisis, but that you are taking intentional steps forward to ensure that it doesn't happen again. I think that was the hardest thing I could imagine, you know, having to do there in that first several weeks was to be the mayor of a city that has to endure something like that. That was incredibly hard.
Can you elaborate on the steps forward of this program you're going to be announcing?
I can't yet. That's in process, and you know, Parvez is working with the team to put together elements of it. That was one of the things we tasked him with. We've been having meetings with various members of the community, and Dollar General has been wonderful to step in and try to help as well. But we've been asking the questions of what needs to happen, what steps do we need to take, what community components can we connect to make sure that people are getting this. And I will tell you the thing that made me feel at least good about our community in this time was that you heard so many people say what happens in Newtown happens to all of us. It wasn't just this happened to this community, even though it feels like that. It was everybody felt deeply what happened in Newtown that day. And I think it's a wake-up call for all of us that this stuff still exists. This bad stuff still exists in our community, and we have to very intentionally deal with it or it will persist.
And the program's going to be announced when? Do you have a time frame? Like this year, you think?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, sometime this year. Okay. Crime is definitely one of the biggest concerns in polls of Jacksonville residents. In the month of September alone, we saw a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old gunned down in separate cases. What are you doing to stop the violence?
Well, obviously working with the sheriff. You know, I think he has taken a lot of steps to try to be more transparent with the community about things that are happening in the sheriff's office. He's doing community walks to let people see him. I think those are steps in the right direction. I think from our side, on the city side, what we can do mostly is to do those things that will impact crime from a prevention, intervention, perhaps even a reentry position for folks that are coming back from being in jail. So the sheriff on the enforcement side, we are trying to rejuvenate the Jacksonville journey and things like our literacy program, which we're putting millions of dollars into to try to move the dial on numbers of literacy in this community, which are frankly dismal. 70% of the people in our jails cannot read at a 4th grade level, and that should tell you a lot about how much literacy impacts outcome in terms of quality of life and really the future of young people. So we're spending a lot of time on literacy this year, and as we continue to reformulate those Jacksonville Journey steps, what you're also going to see is a lot more support for folks that are coming back from being in prison to make sure that they have the opportunities and the tools that they need to be successful citizens.
How do you think TK Waters is doing as sheriff? And if you had to give him a letter grade, what would it be?
Well, I'll leave it to the community to do the grades on all of us, but I will say that for me, he's been a good partner. You know, I think we've gotten along well. We're working together on an initiative to try to stem gun violence by coming out with a PSA and a number of other elements that go along with that to talk to people about how to properly store their guns. A lot of times when you hear about these shootings of young people and children, it's because somebody has found a gun that was stored improperly, and that gun was used by a child or frankly picked up by somebody to use for a nefarious purpose. And if we can teach people how to keep their guns safe and away from people that shouldn't have them, I think that at least is a step. So we're working together on that. So as I said before, I think what you're seeing from this sheriff is you're seeing more steps toward transparency. And I think that goes a long way.
One of the things that's happened in the first 100 days is a very controversial arrest of Lakean Woods here in Jacksonville. Police say that it appears that their officers did everything right. There was no wrongdoing. However, his mother and a lot in the community have called for accountability. And one of the things his mother is asking for is that that the Justice Department get involved and investigate his arrest. What do you think about her calls for the Justice Department to get involved?
Well, I can tell you that I have spoken with her and I have spoken with the sheriff about this case. Because there is now a lawsuit that's involved, I've been advised by the general counsel's office that I cannot comment while there is a lawsuit against the city, so I really can't comment on this case. But I'm sure it's going to get plenty of attention.
Tell me about the Jaguars, and a lot of people want to know about where negotiations stand with stadium renovations. You're talking about a lot of taxpayer money, yes. And it's an issue. Some people are all for it. Some people are like, we don't want $1 billion spent of our taxpayer money. Where do the negotiations stand right now?
Well, we've had one meeting so far. And that was really to introduce the negotiating teams. As you know, we've brought in a national negotiating team that is used to doing deals like this with the NFL. We've all met. And now we're going to get started. So what we're waiting on right now is there are several items that the Jaguars are supposed to return to us in terms of just detail of cost and things that we need, and then we'll schedule a second meeting. But that's where we are now, really in the infancy of this process. I'm hoping we can get through it sooner rather than later. I'd like to put this behind us and move forward and start working on that stadium and the surrounding economic development that I hope comes from it. And I believe we will get to that deal, but right now we're just at the very beginning stages.
I know Shad Khan has said publicly he'd like to see this worked out by the second quarter of next year. Is that possible in your mind? Do you think that's a reasonable timeline?
Well, I hope so. You know, I'd like to see it done sooner rather than later. As I said, I don't know if I can put an exact timeline on it, but I would like to see it get done, because then we can get started in earnest on a lot of the things. What excites me in the discussions is I like the idea of not only the stadium, which I think is going to be a marquee piece for the city that will help us to attract concerts and other sporting events and things like that. But what excites me is the surrounding economic development piece, if we can get that right. I would love to see a lot of those neglected neighborhoods that have been waiting for a long time for some love to get some benefit out of this, and to see how we could partner to do those things. Because I think if we're really going to be successful downtown, and we are, we have to work that block by block. And I think that could be a big piece, connecting those neighborhoods and then continuing to put those pieces together to make that downtown look the way we want it to look, and be a place where everybody wants to come, live, work, and play. And that's the goal. So I would like to get it done in that time frame, but time will tell. I'm sure that that's going to be a process.
And you brought in an outside firm to help with the negotiation process. How involved are you going to be in actually hands-on negotiating?
Well, I think that people know, I have let the team know things that are important to me, like the economic development piece. I've certainly been briefed on everything that's happening, but as I said during the campaign, my desire was to bring in professional negotiators, folks that do this for a living, that can hopefully get the best deal for the city that we can get. So ultimately, the buck stops with me on any stadium deal. I have to approve whatever the framework of an agreement is, but I'm not going to be in the day-to-day negotiations.
And for those Jacksonville residents who say, we don't want to spend $1 billion of taxpayer money on stadium renovations in the sports entertainment district. What do you want them to know?
Well, what I want them to know is that I am going to negotiate the best deal for the city that I can possibly negotiate. However, you know, you ask those same people, and this has been every single community meeting we've had. We had thousands of people who have shown up to these community meetings that I've had with all the council members. And the first thing they'll say is, we don't want to spend this money. And I'll say, okay, raise your hand if you want the Jaguars to leave. Nobody. So it's, as I've said, 80% don't want to spend the money. 80% don't want the Jaguars to leave. Those two things are mutually exclusive. The NFL has made that clear. There's going to have to be some sort of a deal that is made here. So our goal, our job, our work is to come up with the best deal we can for the taxpayers. And that's what we're working on. So I've talked to other mayors that have been through this process. It's always a contentious process. Anytime that you are talking about a potentially large investment of taxpayer dollars, that's a conversation that's going to get contentious, right? But I think once everything is completed, if we do this right, I think it can be a real boost to our local economy, and I think those neighborhoods, and especially those people that may not see the benefit, will see the benefit. And it's our job to tell that story and to show the benefit that it's going to bring to the community.
And I think we talk so much. I mean, as long as I've been in Jacksonville for more than a decade, I've heard people talk about downtown development, about revitalization. Do you really think that it is finally going to happen? And what part of downtown? Because it's so diverse and there's so many different neighborhoods. Where is the priority?
Well, like I said, I think it is a neighborhood by neighborhood issue. There are a lot of connected neighborhoods downtown, and I know you've heard the recent announcement of the project up here, that the Gateway project, that is going to be a couple $1 billion project by the time that it's all done. You know, there are pieces that are coming together, and so what we have to do is to me, the best thing for us to do is to try to focus on a piece at a time and to connect those dots. One of the things that we can do as a city, and that we are in the process of doing, is finally getting underway on that process of making streets in the downtown two-way. That's going to create a lot more traffic and a lot less confusion down here. That may sound like a small thing, it really is not. So we're also working on streamlining the permitting process and streamlining the processes that seem to hold these projects up, so that, you know, you start here and then a year later you're not in development yet. We're working on all of that right now with all of our city departments. In fact, we have a meeting coming up next week where we're all going to get together and discuss what the pinch points are and what we can do to streamline those processes. I think a lot of our success downtown will come from creating less friction in the process, and that's what we're working on.
I hadn't heard about the two-way streets. Is that something that's going to happen soon? Do you have a timeline on that?
Well, it has been approved, and so it should start soon.
Wow. Okay, so changing them to two ways. Okay. City Council. So two of your picks for General Counsel and Director of Neighborhoods, both Republicans, the opposite party, didn't come to fruition. Were you surprised that the Republican City Council members did not back your choices, and why do you think that didn't happen?
I was a little surprised. I think I will say that initially I did not get the sense the pushback was going to be as big as it was. I knew that there had been some friction with some of those council members. I knew with the previous administration there had been some friction, but I did not get the idea in initial talks that those picks were going to be as problematic as they were. However, I will say that I thought it was important to make them. I said when I came in here I was going to create a government that looks like Jacksonville, Republicans, Democrats, Independents. I have already done that, but those two picks in particular I thought were important because they were particularly people that I got to know on the campaign trail or throughout the last several years, that I felt did things the right way for the right reasons, for the people, to make sure that the people were first and not the politics. And so they were the same folks that pushed back against the sale of JEA. They were the same folks that spoke out when they felt like the establishment was doing things the wrong way. And that's the culture that I'm trying to change here. So I thought the picks were important. I'm sorry they didn't make it through, but at the same time, I think that we have to continue to make efforts to change, and I'll continue to try to make those efforts.
And how did that impact your relationship with the City Council?
Well, I think I have a pretty good relationship with the city council. And I will say that I'll give a lot of credit to President Salem for helping me navigate those waters as we got into the actual budget discussion. I think that when you take the PICs out of it, and there were some contentious conversations there, and I think there turned out to be more relationship issues there than I initially anticipated in terms of what was going on with council and those PICs. But when we got past that piece and we started looking at our priorities for the city, infrastructure, health, economic development, small business development, we're all pretty much on the same page with those things, making sure that we're taking care of the homeless, making sure that we're creating more affordable housing. Those are things that we all have in common. So when we started to break down for council, here's what we want to do with the $25 million from the transition committee, I think we've gotten a lot of agreement so far on what we want to do. So as I said all the way through this, Heather, I believe you peel away the culture war issues. And I think that what city government really is supposed to do is make sure that people are safe, make sure they have lights and sidewalks and those sorts of things, make sure that that they have good jobs and good schools, and those are the things that I think that council and myself are doing a good job at working together on. So I'm excited about that. This is the first time in 15 years that we've had a budget that has passed unanimously. And that says something to me about our priorities. So that makes me very happy.
Talk about London. You went over there representing the city. What kind of fruit came out of that trip?
Wow, that was a busy trip. We landed in London at about 6 o'clock in the morning. Went for a quick run in the park to shake off the cobwebs and took a shower and went straight into interviews and then business meetings. And literally that was, every day was, we went with 50 companies in 5 days while we were over there. We met with a lot of the trade ministers. We met with the head of the Gatwick airport. When I was asked to go over by Jax USA and the chamber, they said, we feel like there are several deals that if we had the mayor of the city involved, if we had you involved, it would show a level of seriousness, a level of commitment to these deals that they would like to see, and we think we could close some of those deals. So we'll see. But I think they went very, very well. I think the conversations went well. I learned a whole lot in a very fast hurry about financial technology and health technology and some of the other business entities that we're working with over there. But I think we're going to end up getting a lot of business for Jacksonville out of it.
And is that companies relocating here? When you talk about deals, it's like bringing...
That's what has happened in the past and what we're continuing to look at. What companies in London are looking at is where do they want their U.S. operations to be? And so what we're seeing more often than not now, that instead of setting up their financial technology companies or arms in Silicon Valley or New York, they're coming to Jacksonville. Jacksonville has become a financial technology hub. And that has brought literally, tens of thousands of jobs to our city, hundreds of millions of dollars. And so if we can increase that pipeline by getting a direct flight, which is one of the big things we worked on when we were over there, and by letting these companies know about our quality of life and our cost of living and all the wonderful things about our city, I think they choose us over a lot of other places that are a lot more expensive to live in and frankly that don't have the quality of life that we have here. So it's just a matter of building relationships. Everything is relationships. And if you take the time to go over and say, we want you here, I think that goes a long way with some people.
And is that direct flight coming, you think?
I think we're going to be able to do that at some point, hopefully soon. I'm hoping that within 18 months to 2 years, we're having some really good discussions about starting that off.
Now, I know the mayor of London has been very big on resiliency. Mm-hmm. Did you all have those discussions with the mayor, and what did you learn?
Yeah, we did. When I met him down on the field at the Jaguars game, and he has really made that his mainstay. He's written a new book. I believe it's called Breathe. He had lung problems as a child because of all of the pollution that was in London, and so a lot of his experiences brought him to really make that as a central issue for people's health there. They were having a lot of health issues. But he just talked about how, once people have started to see the differences, that some of those policies that have wrought in terms of better quality of life in the city, that people have gotten more excited about it. And I think that's what has to happen over time. People have to see when you put these policies in place, what differences they make, and hopefully we'll have the same outcome here. We're about to release a a big resilience report on Friday that will be a great map for us for flooding and heat and for how we move forward as a city in terms of how we develop. And I think that will be a true, gosh, I think we're going to be a model for the rest of the country in how we deal with those things.
Health has been a huge priority of yours. You campaigned on the health pillar. You have a new health officer for the city. What can we expect on that front? Like, where would you say, how would you rate Jacksonville's health right now, and what can we see coming to improve the health?
Well, we have a real challenge when it comes to primary health numbers. Our infant mortality, our maternal mortality numbers are worse than they are in a lot of third world countries. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of our primary health numbers are very poor, the worst in the state, some of the worst in the country. And so when we started to look at what we can do about that, part of that is simply education. Making people aware of services that are already available to them they do not utilize. There's been a lot of attention lately to how much is available that sits there that people do not utilize because, you know, what I always say is if your mind is confused about how something works, you just leave it alone. You just tend to not deal with it. And that's what happens. So education will be a piece of that. We're also going to work with a lot of the nonprofits in the area that are doing the very good work of trying to connect people to better health services. We're going to create a better opportunity for telehealth so that people that can't or don't want to go to the doctor, you know, that don't have that opportunity, we can connect them through telehealth services. And we're going to make sure that people know how to sign up for the Affordable Care Act. There are scores of people who could get free health care, you know, get a subsidy for free health care because of their income or lack thereof, that do not know that. So they're going to the emergency room for care every time they get sick, driving up the costs and making things very, very difficult for our health system here. So all those things are, you know, it's connecting the dots of what exists and also making sure that people know how to access what's available to them and creating more lanes of opportunity there.
And what's coming for infrastructure? People know when they ride over a pothole, right, they're calling our TV station. You know, what can we expect on the infrastructure front?
The funny thing, you know, that was the #1 pillar in my campaign was infrastructure. And when I have these community meetings, no matter whether I'm on the north side or whether I'm in Mandarin or whether I'm at the beach, I mean the very same things over and over again. It's never any of these hot button issues you always hear about, you know, in the media. It's always, I've been calling about a pothole for 6 years and nobody's taking care of it. Or if one more guy speeds down my street and they don't stop and they're gonna kill somebody or what, you know, they're always the same issues. And so I think that infrastructure is a big piece of that. People get frustrated when infrastructure doesn't get taken care of. And one of the things we heard over and over again was people felt like there was too much trash all along their neighborhoods. They felt like there was never enough mowing or landscaping. We've increased that budget by 95% because it's imperative for the people in our communities to take pride in their communities and to see that the city takes pride in that. That's a small thing, but it's a big thing. You know, for people to see that their lawns, the city part of that is going to be kept. We've also invested a lot of money in infrastructure projects in areas that have been neglected. We're trying very hard. I'm working with JEA to move forward in a faster fashion that removal of septic tanks that we need to remove that are poisoning our groundwater. So there are a number of things that we've already targeted, and in the coming year, when we actually get to put together more of what our budget will look like, I think you're going to see a lot more movement on that front.
What are you most proud of in your first 100 days?
You know, I knew you were going to ask me that, and that's a hard question to answer. I think the thing I'm most proud of is probably our community meetings. To have 14 community meetings that also partnered with each council person in each one of those districts, where literally we just stood there for an hour and a half listening to people's concerns, I think sets a tone for this administration that I hope sets a bar for everybody else. That if you are going to be effective, first you have to hear from people about what they feel you're doing right and what they feel you're doing wrong and what you can do to make their lives better. And I think to have me there along with the council person in that district has been really, really helpful for people in this community to say, gosh, you know, our mayor and our council are working together to try to solve the problems for us. And I think that's something I'm real proud of.
Anything else you want to add about what's to come or what people can expect?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm looking forward to the next year. I'm really glad to be past the budget. I'm hoping to exhale for a few minutes and then to get to work on next year's budget. But it's been a very full and mostly satisfying first 100 days.